All right, gentlemen, take your seats. Let's get started. What I'm about to lay out for you is a critical, time-sensitive briefing on the last 24 hours in the Iranian theater. Look, the situation has escalated with a speed that's, well, it's rewritten the entire strategic map of the Middle East. It's also forcing us to question everything we thought we knew about deterrence and stability in the region. The intelligence is, as you'd expect, still coming in hot, but the trajectory is crystal clear, and frankly, it is alarming. We are facing a full-blown multi-domain crisis, and the choices we make in the next few hours, they're going to have consequences for decades to come. Here's how we're going to break this down today. First, we'll cover the catalyst, what kicked all of this off, the coalition's decapitation strikes, and the thinking behind them. Then we'll do a deep dive into Iran's retaliation, which, I have to say, has been way broader and more sophisticated than our models predicted. From there, we're moving to the economic war front. This is expanding fast, hitting choke points and even new tech domains. That leads us directly to our most urgent tactical problem, the air defense dilemma, a war of attrition where the math is not in our favor. And we'll wrap up by looking at the geopolitical fallout, the fractures that are starting to show up in our own alliances under all this pressure. Let's begin. So first things first, the catalyst. To really understand the chaos that's swallowing the Gulf right now, we have to rewind the clock just about 24 hours. The decision was made to carry out a series of, well, unprecedented surgical strikes right in the heart of Tehran. This was a classic high-risk, high-reward operation. The whole theory was that if you cut off the head of the snake, the body would be paralyzed. It was a calculated gamble, meant to stop a massive series of attacks by Iranian proxies that we knew were coming. This was the move that lit the fuse. But before we get into the why, I want you to just absorb the what. This is the immediate effect. Iran's response wasn't just fast, it was a staggering, coordinated show of force. We're tracking a multi-front saturation attack, waves of kamikaze drones and salvos of ballistic missiles hitting the entire Gulf region at once. You can see from the data here our key partners, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Bahrain, they took the brunt of it. And when you see high volume, I want you to picture dozens of drones hitting a single target at the same time. Sustained salvos means they aren't stopping. As soon as we knock down one wave, the next is already on its way. Now, if you look at the trend line, you see a deliberate and, frankly, a deeply concerning strategy playing out. This isn't just a sporadic, angry reaction. The volume of fire is compounding day after day. This tells us it's a pre-planned IRGC strategy designed to empty their arsenals and simply overwhelm our layered air defense systems with sheer numbers. They are targeting our ability to absorb the hit. They know we have the better tech, no question, but they're betting that our defenses have a limit. They're betting that they can burn through our million-dollar interceptor stockpiles before we can take out their thousands of launch sites. So let's circle back to what started it all. The objective of the coalition op was unambiguous: to shatter Iran's chain of command. The main targets were two men who are really the pillars of the regime's power. First, Ali Larijani, the ultimate insider, Iran's de facto security chief, the guy holding all the levers of power. Second, Holam Reza Soleimani, the ruthless commander of the Basij, the regime's muscle and its tool for internal control. Our intelligence confirms both were eliminated. The strategic hope was to throw the regime into a state of paralysis, forcing them to look inward and deal with a succession crisis, which would disrupt their external ops. It's now painfully clear that gamble failed. And the operation wasn't just about leadership. It was a systematic effort to dismantle their command and control infrastructure, to create cascading failures. First, stealth bombers hit and completely leveled the IRGC Navy HQ. This wasn't just about taking out a building, it was about blinding their ability to coordinate the very maritime war we're now seeing in the Strait of Hormuz. At the same time, strikes on Merops airport took out key transport aircraft for their leadership. The goal there? Trap their secondary commanders in the capital, keep them from getting to their hardened bunkers. A major symbolic blow was dealt to the Assembly of Experts building. That's the body that picks the supreme leader, a direct shot at the regime's legitimacy. And finally, to loosen their grip at home, Basij checkpoints were hit systematically to degrade their ability to crush any potential uprisings.
So, was the regime paralyzed? Far from it. Their response was immediate, it was asymmetric, and it was dangerously broad. They knew they couldn't win a straight-up conventional fight with us, so they didn't even try. Instead, they decided to attack us and our allies on multiple fronts and in multiple domains at once. They're targeting what they see as our vulnerabilities, trying to create a crisis so damn complex that it just overwhelms our ability to make decisions. And this right here shows you just how severe their retaliation is. In a massive escalation, a suicide drone, probably a Shahed 136, launched from a mobile platform, got through layered Saudi and US air defenses, and hit the United States Embassy complex in Riyadh. Let me be absolutely clear here. Under international law, that is a kinetic strike on sovereign U.S. territory. It is a direct act of war, and it's an intelligence failure on our part. It crosses a red line that was drawn to prevent exactly this type of scenario.
At the exact same time, Iran pulled the trigger on its long-planned economic warfare doctrine. The IRGC went after the economic lifelines of our Gulf allies with a two-pronged attack. First, a drone hit the UAE's Shah sour gas field, a critical piece of their energy infrastructure, causing a massive fire and an immediate production shutdown. Then, out at sea, a commercial oil tanker was hit by a projectile near the strategic port of Fujairah. Now, the location is key here. Fujairah is outside the Strait of Hormuz. The message is simple, and it's brutal. If Iran can't ship its oil, nobody in the region will, and there are no safe harbors.
And this fire is not contained, not by a long shot. Even countries trying to stay neutral are being dragged into this. Qatari forces using our Patriots had to take out a ballistic missile over their own capital, Doha, and the falling shrapnel started fires on the ground. Oman, which is usually a quiet diplomatic back channel, had to engage multiple drones, and there were civilian casualties from the debris. In Bahrain, home to the Navy's Fifth Fleet, has been under constant attack. That number, over 100 projectiles intercepted, that's a direct stress test of our own base defenses. The strain on air defense crews across the region is just immense.
Now, while all eyes are on the Gulf, we can't forget that a critical second front has just opened in the north. The IDF, recognizing the absolute necessity of neutralizing Iran's most capable and dangerous proxy, has launched targeted ground operations into southern Lebanon. Their goal is to take apart Hezbollah's command structure and degrade the arsenal of over 150,000 rockets and missiles before they can be used in a massive strike against Israel. It's a preemptive move designed to stop a two-front war from turning into an impossible three-front war. This brings us to the third part of our briefing, because the kinetic fight, the missiles, the drones, that's only half the story. The battles being fought on the economic and tech fronts might end up being just as decisive. Iran is deliberately making the battlefield bigger, moving into areas where our conventional military superiority doesn't matter as much, and where they can cause the most global chaos. And here we're seeing a really chilling evolution in their doctrine. The IRGC is now openly threatening what we call cyber-kinetic attacks. Now, we're not talking about just stealing data or shutting down websites anymore. A cyber-kinetic attack is a digital hack designed to cause a physical, real-world destructive effect. Think about manipulating control systems to make a refinery explode or shutting down a power grid. This closes the gap between the virtual and the physical battlefield. And they've already told us who they're targeting. And crucially, their target list goes right for the backbone of modern warfare and the global economy, American tech infrastructure. They've explicitly named data centers for Amazon, Google, and Microsoft as high-value targets. Their goal here is twofold. First, blinds U.S. intelligence. Our entire intel gathering machine, from drones to satellites, runs on the processing power of these commercial cloud facilities. Attacking them is an attempt to sever our military's nervous system. Second, it's to cause maximum chaos for the global economy, which is totally dependent on this exact same infrastructure. We've already tracked drones probing the airspace around an Amazon facility in Bahrain. This is not an empty threat. But their biggest economic weapon, their checkmate move, is this. The IRGC has started a total blockade of the Strait of Hormuz. The world's most critical energy choke point is now shut down. They've set up a layered defense zone using fast attack craft, sea mines, mobile anti-ship missiles, and drone swarms. In effect, they have put up a wall of fire across the strait, and they're holding a huge chunk of the global energy supply hostage. To really understand the gravity of this, just look at the chart. That red slice that's now blockaded, that's 20%, 1/5 of the entire world's daily oil supply. But it's also about 1/3 of all seaborne natural gas. This move doesn't just squeeze us or our regional partners. It's a direct threat to the energy security of Europe and key Asian allies like Japan and South Korea. It puts an immediate, severe strain on the entire global supply chain, because the other 80% of routes, they just can't absorb a shock this big. The market's reaction was instant, and it was brutal. Crude oil prices shot up to $120 a barrel overnight, and they are still climbing. The International Energy Agency has authorized an emergency release of strategic reserves, but let's be honest, that's a temporary fix. It's a bandage on a hemorrhaging wound. Financial analysts are predicting that if that strait stays closed for more than a week, we're not just talking about high gas prices. We are looking at the trigger for a catastrophic global recession. Okay, This brings us to the core analytical problem of this briefing, and frankly, the most pressing tactical challenge we have on our hands right now. We are locked in a war of attrition in the skies over the Gulf, and the fundamental math of this fight is working against us. This is the vulnerability Iran has spent more than a decade designing its entire force to exploit. So the central question we have to answer right now is this: can our technologically superior, multi-billion-dollar air defense systems, our Patriots, THAAD, Aegis, can they actually withstand a relentless, never-ending swarm of cheap, mass-produced drones? These premier systems were designed to counter a small number of very sophisticated threats, like advanced fighter jets or ballistic missiles. They were not designed, not doctrinally and not economically, for this kind of high-volume, low-tax saturation attack. Iran isn't trying to outclass us. They're trying to outlast us. And this slide, this right here, lays out the brutal economics of the problem in black and white. Iran can launch a Shahed drone that costs them maybe $20,000. To take that one threat out, we are often forced to fire a Patriot interceptor that costs us about $4 million. That is a 200-to-1 cost exchange ratio in their favor. This is profoundly, dangerously unsustainable. We are literally trading our most advanced and expensive assets for their cheapest and most disposable ones. For the cost of one of our interceptors, they can build 200 more drones. We cannot win that equation. And we don't have long. The Pentagon has issued a stark warning based on the current burn rate. If Iran keeps up this pace, our allied interceptor stockpiles for our high-end systems in this theater, they are projected to hit critical levels in an estimated 10 days. 10 days. And let me be clear what critical levels means. It doesn't mean we're out. It means commanders on the ground will be forced to make impossible choices. Do you defend the airbase or the city's water supply? Do you protect the port or the command center? That is the strategic paralysis they're trying to create. So what are we doing about it? In response to this crisis, we've initiated a countermeasure. The U.S. Army is executing an emergency deployment of 10,000 Merops interceptor drones to the theater. The goal here is to rebalance that economic equation. The Merops is a counter-drone drone. It's designed to kill threats like the Shahed at a tiny fraction of the cost of a Patriot. The idea is to use these cheaper, more plentiful drones to take on the swarms of low-end threats, which will allow us to save our high-end, limited supply interceptors for the really dangerous stuff, the ballistic missiles. We're fighting mass with mass, but this is a massive logistical challenge, and it's a race against the clock. Finally, we have to talk about the geopolitical fallout. As the military situation gets worse, our diplomatic alliances are coming under immense strain. A military crisis of this size has a way of exposing cracks that were already there in political willpower, and this crisis is doing it at a dangerously fast pace. The unity we had in the first phase is starting to crumble under the weight of this escalation. And that brings us to this very moment. President Trump has issued a direct ultimatum to our European allies. He is demanding they deploy naval assets to form a coalition to forcibly reopen the Strait of Hormuz. But we are getting major pushback from the UK and France. They see this as a US-Iran crisis that has spun out of control, and they're afraid of being dragged into a wider war with consequences they can't predict for their own security and their own economies. This diplomatic gridlock leaves the United States at a critical decision point. Do we act alone to break the blockade and risk shattering the NATO alliance in the process? Or do we wait for consensus that might never come and risk a global economic collapse? The entire Middle East is on a razor's edge, and the next 24 hours, they will be decisive. That concludes this briefing.